So I'm going to start by acknowledging the treaty territory that we are on. So we're on Treaty 4 territory here. This is my classroom. And embedded in my classroom is this territorial acknowledgement. So we've got on our map of Saskatchewan, I have written on the Treaty 4 area. And we also have the Treaty 4 flag. So Treaty 4, as we know, is the homeland of the Cree, the Saulteaux, the Nakota, Dakota, and Lakota peoples, as well as homeland of the Métis. And more than just reciting history, this recognition is really necessary for us as settlers. So we acknowledge in treaty the ceremonies that make possible our ability to be here, and we recognize the possibility of relating to each other in good ways. Tanse. My name is Claire Kruger, and I am a grade 3, formerly grade 3 teacher, now grade 8 French immersion teacher in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. I am a white settler. I am also a mother. So my husband and I created these 3 munchkins, but we also adopted 2 of our Saulteaux nieces. So while I am a white educator, I am also mother to Indigenous children. This allows me to see things that my colleagues might not see and to feel things that they don't always feel. So I'm going to talk in my presentation a little bit about how I frame treaty education in my classroom. And that's important, right? We have a message from the Saskatchewan Office of the Treaty Commissioner that we are all treaty people. That's super important. But before I begin, I wanted to talk a little bit about water. So I always read before going to bed, and a while ago I was reading Children of the Broken Treaty by Charlie Angus. Now, I wouldn't really recommend this as bedtime reading. In truth, it's the stuff of nightmares and insomnia. And there's this one part about water and water treatment plants on reserves. It was about the $1.9 billion that was spent on new water plants. And these plants don't connect to houses and that are already over capacity from day one and that don't even meet basic building codes. And these are the new plants that we're talking about. And at that time, I was reading that part in the book, and I went and I picked up Maclean's magazine. And I opened it up and I was reading it, and there it was again. 92 First Nations still don't have access to clean drinking water, some despite decades of waiting. So I started thinking about dog whistle politics, and I'm wondering about who can hear these messages about water. What frequency is that on, and why is that frequency not being picked up by Canadians in a big way? At what point do we train our ears not to listen and our hearts not to care? And who did this training? Because maybe it was me, your friendly neighborhood elementary teacher. Because we teachers impress upon students in subtle and not so subtle ways who matters, who's important, who deserves to be able to drink clean drinking water. And by the time these students, my students, your students, become adults, they cannot see or hear these stories in a way that matters. That's why education is so important. That's why our jobs as teachers are so crucial. All those Maclean's readers numbly turning the page on First Nations water crises used to be our students. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about strategies for ensuring the success of Indigenous students within the framework of Treaty Ed. This is one of our 5 education sector strategic goals. And as a mother to 2 Indigenous students, both of whom have had significant difficulties at school, I have some ideas about this. But it's not what you might think. My daughters don't want more cultural programming. They don't want to be taught the history of Canada. They don't want Native studies, especially when these programs are aimed at them specifically. They'll tell you that they know all that stuff already. What they want is to be treated fairly. What they want is for the color of their skin not to be a barrier to their success. What they want is for their classmates to know and understand the things that they know and understand about being Indigenous. What they want is not to be stopped repeatedly in the hallway and behind the counter at McDonald's and at volleyball practice to be asked, "What are you? Are you Mexican?" being made to feel in so many subtle and unsubtle ways that they don't belong. So I'm all about ensuring the success of Indigenous students, but the problem isn't an Indian problem. It's a white problem. The focus needs to be on our non-Indigenous students and the racism that we have gotten so good at teaching them. So racism in Saskatchewan is pervasive, it's insidious, and it's deadly. We need only look as far as Colton Boushie's murder 2 summers ago to see that this is true. This past summer, there was Kamoa Kapo attacked in the Canadian Tire store. These are stories that are all around us. And if we think back to Colton Boushie, a 22-year-old man from the Red Pheasant Cree Nation in central Saskatchewan who was shot by a white farmer after pulling into the farmyard, that in itself was horrific enough. But that was only the beginning. From the response of the RCMP, to the proliferation of hateful comments on social media, to the GoFundMe campaign to support the murderer, it's no longer possible to ignore the ongoing and pronounced racism in Saskatchewan, and by extension Canada at large. If we want to improve Indigenous achievement at school, we need to stop making racism and colonialism our underlying curriculum. So I work at one of the largest schools in southern Saskatchewan. We have close to 700 students from pre-K to grade 8 in both an English program and a French immersion program. And the majority of our students are white. We do not have a really large, culturally diverse student body, and we have relatively few Indigenous students. And when I talk at different conferences, many teachers tell me that that should be a point where we don't need to really be talking about this. Many teachers still believe that treaty ed and cultural programming and teaching our history really only matters if you have a large Indigenous student population. But that's not true, and in this building, we believe actually the opposite. That actually because the Indigenous students are so few in our building, we need to put even more effort into the cultural programming and teaching these histories and building these relationships. So in Saskatchewan, as you know, we have mandatory treaty education curriculum designed to be taught in all grades and in all subject areas. And I like to think of this more as settler ed, as the vast majority of my students are settlers and don't really know what this means or how it relates to their life. So teaching about treaties, in my opinion, is about learning the benefits and responsibilities that come with sharing this land, and is about honoring the long history of this place.